Yeah, welcome everyone. I'm Dan Harrison, the Director of Operations at Taranaki Regional Council, and also the Chair of the Poplar and Willow Research Trust. Welcome along. You're welcome to leave your camera on for this webinar, although most of the time we're going to be sharing our screen. But I'd just like to ask you to leave your microphones on mute. We'll have an opportunity for questions and answers. So obviously at that point you can unmute so that we can hear what your question is. And along the way, feel free to put any questions that you might have into the Q&A. If you look at the ribbon along the top, you'll see the Q&A button. So you can click on that and put any questions that you might have in there if you've got any questions. So yeah, the Poplar and Willow Research Trust, we work closely with regional councils. There's 7 people on the trust, made up of from a range of backgrounds: science, forestry, farming, academia, finance and business, and regional councils. So what we're going to do today, we're going to run through our strategy, what we've got in our strategy, and then we'll move on to the action plan, which is our 12-month plan for the next year, the annual plan. We're all pretty aware of the changing climate and the impact that that's having on communities in the hill country. So we need solutions to address the problems that we've got, and the trust is in a pretty unique position to facilitate some of that work in partnership with others. So we've all seen some beautiful pictures of Aotearoa, New Zealand. It's a beautiful country, but unfortunately, sometimes when we look to the hill country, particularly after a significant storm, this is really what it looks like. Serious loss of soil. If you don't have soil, you can't grow grass, and if you can't grow grass, you can't grow livestock. With loss of soil, you've got increased runoff, which means faster flood peaks, higher flood peaks, and also with less attenuation, you haven't got that sponge from the soil and the vegetation, so you've got lower summer low flows as well. Also, loss of carbon, virtually no biodiversity, so a significant issue, not to mention the sedimentation of waterways and estuaries. And if it looks like this at the top, it's very likely that this is what it's going to look like at the bottom. So very devastating for communities, massive cost, massive cleanup cost, as well as the smothering of probably even more productive farmland. So what do you do about it? Well, there's a bunch of things that we can do. Like I say, we've all seen the impacts that these events are having, particularly Cyclone Gabriel and some of the more recent ones. So it reinforces the fact that we need to continue to evolve modern solutions for what's going to continue to be tomorrow's problems. Many farms will be able to incorporate a range of options. Yep, we're the Poplar and Willow Research Trust, but that doesn't mean that we're suggesting that every tree you plant needs to be a poplar or willow. We know that it's the right tree in the right place. So for most farms, it's going to be a mixture of natives, poplars and willows, potentially some forestry as well. The picture here, you can see an example of spaced poplar plantings. So really good for minimizing erosion whilst enabling farming to continue. They're deciduous, so you don't get the shading and other issues associated with evergreen trees in the winter, but they also provide shade for stock in the summer, as well as being able to use them for stock fodder. And not to mention the aesthetics, they certainly make farms look a lot more beautiful as well. So it's not that there aren't solutions that already exist. We just simply need to use them more widely and more effectively. This is a 3-year-old Veronese poplar. You can see pretty extensive root system there. There's a bunch of statistics there that you can see and read, but it's not just about those particular stats. It's also about how quickly these trees establish. Within less than 10 years, they're creating hundreds of meters of roots that physically reinforce the soil like a mesh. So in terms of our strategy, you've got to know where you're going so that you can head in the right direction. The strategy for the New Zealand Poplar and Willow Research Trust is to ensure New Zealand landscapes and communities are protected, enhanced, and resilient to the threats of climate change, erosion, and pests and disease incursions. The strategy is really about where we want to make a difference over the next 10 years. Our focus isn't simply on undertaking research for research's sake. It's about delivering practical impact that farmers, regional councils, and industry can see and use. We want to help create more resilient landscapes that are better able to cope with the challenges of climate change, erosion, and changing land use. A big part of our role is also ensuring that knowledge doesn't sit on the shelf. We want to strengthen the way research is shared and adopted while investing in future-ready solutions through genetics, innovation, and new technologies. At the same time, we're committed to building long-term capability by developing partnerships, supporting our ambassadors, and ensuring the knowledge we've built over decades continues to benefit future generations. How we achieve this is just as important as what we achieve. We want to be bold enough to challenge traditional thinking, innovative in the way we approach problems, agile enough to respond to changing needs, always evidence-based in our decisions, and collaborative because we know the best outcomes come from working together. So what's the opportunity for the trust? One of the clearest opportunities is to strengthen the partnerships we already have with regional councils, catchment groups, and others who share our commitment to sustainable land management. By working together, we can achieve far more than any one organisation can on its own. We also see enormous potential in taking an integrated catchment approach to bioengineering and natural infrastructure, helping to protect farms, roads, and waterways from the increasing impacts of extreme weather. At the same time, we know that great research only creates value if people know about it and use it. That's why we're placing greater emphasis on demonstration sites, telling our story more effectively, improving our digital tools, and making practical information easier to access. Finally, we want to continue influencing the wider landscape by supporting policy that reflects good science and practical farming experience, while encouraging more landowners and practitioners to adopt proven poplar and willow solutions. Ultimately, that's how we create lasting impact, partnering with others to invest in green infrastructure to avoid future costs. So I'm going to hand over to Sally now, and Sally will share with us a little bit more about the details of the strategy. Thanks, Sally.
Just trying to unmute myself. Kia ora. Lovely to see you all here today. So now we're getting into a little bit about the key parts of the strategy, and we work on 4 pillars. So they are breeding, germplasm, extension, and research. And these are all interconnected, that each pillar is important in its own right, and they need to work together to get real outcomes. So we've got breeding, which is resilient, fit for purpose, poplar and willow plant material that meet future land use, climate and biosecurity needs. Germplasm, which is really our insurance, is to protect and strengthen the genetic resources to supply future breeding, resilience and innovation. Research, again, builds strong evidence base that supports poplar and willow in erosion control, river management, biodiversity, climate adaptation and resilient farm systems. An extension which helps translate all this information into practical guidance, some tools, case studies and resources for landowners, practitioners, councils and alike. But I'd just like to reiterate the importance of having partnerships to enable this to be achieved. Next. So the first pillar, we'll go into a bit more detail, so is breeding. Just, I guess, to make it clear that the pathway to getting a cultivar out to the end users, it takes approximately 15 years. So this is a long-term project. It's not something that we have actually, to be fair, we have actually slowed down the breeding process at the moment because that's to do with funding and the ability to do that. But it does take time and you won't see new cultivars coming out on an annual basis. We need to make sure that the trees that we are planting now are going to be withstand what's happening in 20 years' time and being able to adapt to climate change and weather events and pest incursions. Next. The germplasm, for us, this is our insurance policy for the future. So one of the things we're trying to ascertain at the moment is just clear stewardship around where our germplasm is actually held. And we're working with BSI to ensure that this is done. We have stands of parent material on all our cultivars that are protected into long term so that we can then use them for any further genetic gain. Thank you. Research, and I think Dan's already made this point, that research isn't an end in itself. So we need to look at research as a value if it changes decisions. So we have historically measured a lot of our success around erosion control, but there's opportunity to look a bit broader and what the whole tree may provide. So we were looking more at bioeconomy systems, bioservices, timber, sequestering carbon, fodder. One of our priorities is to better understand what the tree in itself can add value to the landscape, the environment that it is, and to measure and communicate those values and benefits. Extension. We already have an enormous amount of information, and most of this is held on our website. One of our challenges, though, is to make it easier to find and easier to understand and easier to apply for the end user. One of our key focuses is to upgrade our website and to make it a gateway into all that information. The main key that is used at the moment is the search key because of it's largely become our depository of information. So we just need to make sure that we have a clearer set of tools. We also have two decision support tools that we've released, which is Fit for Sight and Explorer. Those are available to anyone. We would like to build and ensure that those remain applicable out in the field. We'd also like to look at other opportunities where that can be they can be utilised or we can create benefit for our end users. So what does success look like at the end of 2036? We really want poplar and willow to be recognised as an essential tool, but we also want New Zealand Poplar and Willow Research Trust to be seen as that national leader and a trusted source of information. We want people to have confidence, our end users and our practitioners in the middle, to have confidence in the tools that they're supplying and using. We want to make sure that our breeding cultivars are actually being tested in the environment. They can survive in the new climate that they are facing. And most importantly, we actually want those stronger partnerships which enable us to continue and develop the work that we want to do. The Trust has a limited budget that needs to be grown to ensure that we can all do this. So success is not about how many reports we've written, but that we have healthier landscapes, more resilient farms and communities, and greater confidence in using poplars and willows. Currently, we work alongside, our funders are primarily regional councils, and we work along BSI as one of our main contractors to help deliver the breeding program and some of the research and extension work. We've also been lucky in the recent years to work alongside Te Uru Rākau, the New Zealand Association of Resource Managers, NZARM, and also the New Zealand Farm Forestry Trust, and especially the Poplar Action Group. And working with all of those, I think we've made great gains in what we can do, but I think there's opportunity for more supporters to come and join us, and also to, to become part of the family, I guess, and to strengthen the work that we're doing.
Excellent, thanks, Sally. That's an overview of our strategy. But of course, there's no point having a strategy if you don't have an action plan to implement. So we're going to take a brief pause in the presentation now to give people an opportunity to ask any questions that they have. Use the little raise your hand button at the top of the ribbon if you've got a question, or if you want to put it into the Q&A, you're welcome to do that. And once we've answered a few questions, if there are any, we'll move on to the annual plan. So I'll just stop sharing for a moment. And does anyone have any questions on the strategy so far, or what you've heard so far? Cool. Clear as the mud at the bottom of a hill with no poplars on it. All right. If anything comes to mind, like I say, stick it in the Q&A, and we can answer those as we go.
I
So
just
we'll move on.
I was just going to say, I think there's one or two people who haven't made it on, but it will be available on our website once we've finished, so that if anyone is missing out, they haven't missed out completely.
Yeah, brilliant. Cool. And as I said, yeah, it's all very well having a strategy, but just like the research, there's no point having something that sits on the shelf. You need to have an action plan to implement to make sure it happens. So we're going to get into the action plan now, and I'll hand over to Sally to take us through this in a bit more detail.
Oops, one moment. So as I mentioned, we've got our 4 pillars. So we'll just quickly go through some of the things that we're going to focus on in the next 12 months. One of the key things is having some standard operating procedures. I know that sounds pretty mundane, but for us, it's about ensuring that we are clear about our selection process. We work clearly with our technical advisory group, which is made up of our regional council supporters, and they help us guide where or what type of tree they want out. And we work with the BSI and the TAG to help achieve that. What we're looking at doing is creating some standard operating procedures that make it very clear what those selection processes and criteria are, to find out what cultivar gaps we have, look at our national trials, and to make sure that all our proposed or new cultivars are being trialled successfully, well, within reason, out in the real world. And we work a lot with our regional councils and landowners to achieve that. As a priority, we were looking at to investigate sterile or male willows. At this stage, that's been temporarily put on hold due to some reduced funding. We also want to look at the breeding and selection criteria. This is in partly too to help regional councils, and some of them are doing their own trialling work, but it just makes to ensure that both the regional council, BSI and the trust are all on the same song sheet and that we all know what we're heading for. We have a huge selection of existing trials nationally throughout the country, and on a rotating basis, depending on how old. So the younger trials will get more reporting and evaluation done, and the older trials will get less. And we contract, at this stage, BSI is contracted to help us deliver on that. Next. The germplasm. So we have BSI are in the process of relocating some of the germplasm cultivars into a central site in Clyde. We also have some known sites. One of them is at the old Country Nursery. So one of our ideas is to ensure that we have at least two cultivars, or sorry, two specimens of each cultivar, so that if something happens on a farm or in a land holding, that those trees, we still have at least a one parent sample. Most of our willows are actually held on the Massey land behind Plant and Food at Bachelor Road. But most of our poplars, not all, but a lot of our poplars are held in private, either on farm or in private nurseries. We want to establish some agreements with those that do hold the germplasm, and that's just to give us a bit more protection as to where those trees are, and that the person who owns the land that they're on knows about their importance. And I've mentioned earlier that we're going to try and have two specimens of each clone and variety, so that we do have some protection going forward in the future. Research. So we are looking at bioeconomy and ecosystem services. So one of our key drives is to actually seek funding this round. As I've mentioned earlier, we have not grown our funding in probably the last 4 years. And so that's a key driver for us, is to ensure we can get some sort of funding to enable us to do some of this research. We're assuming that the program, once it's developed, would be actually over a longer period of time. But there are some low-hanging fruit that hopefully we can grab and use initially. And part of this too is that the nurseries, predominantly, we do have a nursery managers group that meets once a year, and we would like to be able to support those people. So collectively, if they approach us with a research program, then hopefully we can support in some manner. And the regional councils, as I mentioned earlier, do have a number of trials in their own regions. And again, it's supporting those, ensuring that their trials are set up correctly and that the data coming out of those trials is collected and is of use and value. Extension. This is a pretty large part of our budget going forward for this year. Again, it's because we have a large pool of information, and as Daniel mentioned earlier, that we're looking at making sure that this information is getting out to the end user. So we're going to increase engagement with some sector leaders. So that's higher up the value chain where we can. We've got our decision support tools that we've released, and we just need to be able to support them. Each of the cultivars that we've released have a fact sheet. We're just going through this year to review that the information that is on those fact sheets are useful for the end user. And we're looking at a number of case studies, about 6, covering a range of topics from river management to the ETS, to riparian management, so that those are quick find fact sheets for people. With the support of Te Uru Rākau, We are going to run 2 more workshops. We ran 2 last year. One was in the top of the south and the other one was in Tairāwhiti. So we're looking at doing that again. So we're very thankful for that support. And we also want to strengthen our communications. For those that haven't been on our website, we have a newsletter. Please sign up for it so that you'll get it on a regular basis. And we have LinkedIn, and we also now have Instagram. So if you are on any of those, please be free to come and join us. So this is just why does all this matter? Why is the trust doing what it's doing? I just want to show you an example of this is 2 properties side by side after Cyclone Gabriel at Tairāwhiti. Our landscapes face significant challenges, but they also provide enormous opportunities. We know that Poplar and Willow work. We have decades of science behind us. We have passionate partners alongside us and a clear strategy for the future. Together, I think we can build landscapes that are more productive, more resilient, and better prepared for the next generation. So our goal is, if over the next decade, more farmers have confidence to plant the right tree in the right place because of the work of the Trust, then I think we've achieved our purpose. Back to you, Dan.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sally. Appreciate that. So that brings the presentations to an end. Hopefully you've got something out of that. We're now open to questions, if anyone's got any. I see someone's asked in the chat, male sterile work, willow work is very important for the future, particularly in the context of climate change, definitely. And alternate fodder value of poplars and willows, high nutrient value, yeah, definitely. So those are 2 things that we have got in our list of things to focus on. So thanks for those comments. Does anyone have any further questions, require any clarification on anything that Sally or I have just discussed?
Are we on the right track?
Are we on the right track? Any comments as to whether this is, you're happy, given that some of you probably work for or are associated with regional councils, and most of the funding comes from regional councils, or you might be landowners. Are we focusing on the right things, or are there things that are not quite right or that we're missing?
And if you don't want to share, I'm happy for people to contact me outside if they wish.
Louise, got a question? Go ahead.
Cool, thank you guys. Really good presentation, and sorry I missed the first 10 minutes due to a computer update, so I'll look at that when you send it around. Yeah, really cool to hear about the strategy for the next 10 years. What would you say the main challenges to actually achieving what you want to in that time? I know funding for some of the individual projects is one of them, but is there anything else?
I think funding largely is probably the big thing. The other point would be, in a willow situation, I guess there's a lot of negativity especially towards willows, and I think that whole debate whether it should be a native or a poplar, a willow or a pine tree still causes us some issues, but I think we just need to focus on selling our story, and that poplars and willows still have a place in our landscape for certain roles.
Yeah, cool. Sorry, supplementary question, Sally. Are you seeing, I mean, obviously through Hill Country Erosion Program and the councils as well, seeing some of that discussion around natives versus poplars and willows, but of course very different uses and different scenarios, and having to kind of push that or convey that narrative. Are you seeing that changing over time or not, for better or for worse? Over, when I say time, I mean kind of decades, like.
We're probably facing a challenge, and I know some councils are having that internal challenge as well, that landowners are wanting native. But if your hillside's not there, then you've got nothing to plant into. So I still think there's been more talk, shall we say, about using poplars and willows as a nurse crop, and then being able to use put the natives underneath so that you can, you know, use both. And those poplars and willows can either be can be used for timber, and that helps fund what they've planted the natives underneath. So yeah, and that's where we come back to the bioeconomy science point of view and how they can all interlink and interrelate. And I think there's opportunity there.
That's cool. Thanks.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think there is an absolute opportunity there, and there's a range of different weeds out there that people they don't sort of classify as one. Willows people group together as one, whereas if you think of clematis, for example, there's old man's beard, but that doesn't mean that every clematis is a weed. We're not going to go and kill all of the native clematis because of old man's beard, but it's imperative that we retain the social license. So that's why we need to ensure that we continue to do the breeding to develop or continue to develop and add to the list of varieties that we already have that aren't weeds, that are a really effective tool, the most effective tool at protecting communities by holding riverbanks together to protect stock banks, by holding hillsides together to make landscapes more resilient. But it's also imperative for practitioners, regional councils, staff, landowners to manage the trees appropriately so that they are planting the correct varieties, that the varieties that are formally released by the trust are the ones that are adopted and used, rather than just cutting branches off the one that just happens to be down the road or down the river a little bit further and using that. It's using the material that we have, but also managing those willows, particularly in riverbeds or on riverbanks, so that they don't become a problem, so that social license continues. Because if we do lose the ability to use these tools, then we will be, in serious trouble from a resilience perspective. Bala, you've got a question.
Yes, thank you very much, Dan and Sally. That was a wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
This is a long-term strategy, isn't it? It's not annual plan or anything like that. So I would still think that there is a bit of a missing. What is our operational plan to mitigate the climate change issues? So we are talking of 2036. So climate change is real, and people say different things, but we have been experiencing Gabriel 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Now every year, now actually in the last 3-4 months, we have seen again within a year 3-4 times. So perhaps I would like to reiterate what I have written in the chat, that we should focus on willows, not only for hill country and poplars, for riparian also. Are we going away from riparian research? I mean, in my view, we should not. And particularly the sedimentation issue is, of course, is very hard to me. And I would like to say that how much soil we are using, and if that we can save, we are doing really a yeoman service to the country. If we can reduce our sedimentation, either hill country erosion or riparian management. And then the second important thing, particularly for fodder and willows, willows and poplars, the value of their species, particularly in terms of fodder, as an alternative fodder, in view of their high nutrient value and metabolizable energy and everything. Actually, we have had a lot of information before, but we should be perhaps focusing in next 10-20 years on those issues, because I know we have to go from C4 gases, C3 to C4, and all those people are working on that. But in this case, we should be focusing on two important things, in my view. One, mitigation of what's happening around us, climate change, and to how best we can reduce our soil loss.
Yeah, no, great questions and comments, Bala. So, most of the presentation was focusing on hill country erosion, yet there is still a big emphasis on riparian planting, and developing willows for riparian planting. I guess one of the things to appreciate perhaps is that we're part of a wider system. So the Poplar and Willow Research Trust has a particular mandate, and we can provide support in certain areas. But then there's regional councils and, Manaki Whenua Land Care Research, for example, that's done a lot of work on quantifying the impact of planting trees on reducing sediment. So I know that work is happening, and the information around that, and there's no doubt some comprehensive reports written, and I know there has been around Cyclone Gabriel in terms of the reduction in sediment. So there is quite a wide range of information available on that. As Sally mentioned in her part of the presentation, we provide workshops and other literature to help with things like bioengineering, so riparian planting for river and flood control resilience, etc., etc. And in terms of fodder, we do focus on that a wee bit. So we've got a plethora of information on our website, which and lots of fact sheets, etc. So there's perhaps more to be done in that space, but if you go to our website, which is on the slide there, you can see the web address. There's a whole heap of information there too. So yeah, Sally.
Sorry, Dan, if I just want to reiterate with that, I think, Bala, that we are doing that, and that's part of the bioeconomy science portfolio, systems, services. And I think there's a lot of information out there, but it comes back to the point that not a lot of it is easily accessible. So again, that's putting all that system stuff work that's together, and some of the information we do have on the website to make it easier to obtain and to see. And that's part of our education and extension process. The other thing I'd just like to clarify is when you say riparian, are you, because there's a bit of confusion, I guess, out of riparian and river management. So there is a fine line between river management requirements versus riparian requirements.
Yeah, Sally, when I was talking about that, I was talking both.
Both, okay.
Both river management, primary and secondary streams. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Bart, you got a question? I see you've put a question in the Q&A, but you're looking like you want to articulate it a bit further, perhaps.
Yeah. Thanks. Great presentation, great information. Thank you. I'm here in Hawke's Bay Regional Council, assisting our river engineering team with putting together a 10-year program involving all planting types, riparian, live willow, live edge protection across all of the main river corridors. We've got Colin Stace, who is a bit of a guru here, also providing input to that, which is excellent. Carried out some site visits around the place to start piecing it together, and I was, it's been a question there, just interested in whether the research to date has put together a list of willow species, particularly more specifically aimed at protecting river edges, whereby they really set those strong root systems, but without quite so much top heavy volume, height, and need for reduction pruning. We've got a massive issue here currently whereby a lot of the the early varieties and cultivars and things that went in 20, 30 years ago are now sort of 30 metres plus, and are starting to sort of fail and tip over and present risk to bridges, etc. So I was just wondering whether there is sort of a hard and fast list of willow species varieties that are sort of, yeah, more root, less tree, if that makes sense. When I posed the question to Colin, he was like, it wasn't clear that there was a list that had sort of been tailored specifically for that, including sterile versus non-sterile and all of those things, because material getting out into the riverbeds and sort of taking root is also an issue that we have to wrestle with as well.
So there's a couple of factors. I know that Trevor is on board today. So Trevor, I don't know whether you want to find your camera and unmute yourself to respond, but largely no. And apart from the willows that are available, so there's a number of shrub willows, osiers and tree willows, I guess. And at the moment, I guess one of the traits with poplars and willows is the biomass that you see above ground is the biomass that you see below ground. But one of the criteria, and this was the willow work that we were looking at doing this year, was actually a sterile / male willow, and it was requested of a slightly smaller stature. So that work isn't done at this stage. So that is on our list as our first one to kick off when we redo our breeding program. So Trevor, are you still there?
I don't see his name there, but
oh, he might have disappeared on us. He was
I
there,
guess,
so
yeah. I mean, I can add to that as well, but the workshops that Sally mentioned is an opportunity to provide information around a lot of the management of. We have workshops that are specific to hill country and workshops that are specific to river management, so they can help with a lot of those questions around managing willows in the riverbed or on the riverbanks. I guess the other thing is often with these things, and it's the same with whether it's trees on the hills or trees in the rivers, people kind of see them as something that they plant and then walk away from and job done. But of course, they all take ongoing maintenance, and that's something that we need to add to our budgets and our asset management plans. And something that I talk about with the river managers a lot is, when we focus on asset management, we often think about stop banks and floodgates and pump stations and all of those sorts of things. But actually, one of the biggest assets that we have is our live tree protection. And it's really important that we continue a cycle of maintenance, whether it's sort of layering or lopping, so that we don't end up in the situation that we're in. But I know it's a challenge because there's always other things that we need to spend the money on, and we've got limited budgets. But that early maintenance certainly can help to reduce those things from happening later on. Yeah.
Yep, we're exploring options around getting pricing for forestry equipment and contractors into our rivers to assist with reduction pruning in order to bring them reset the sort of structure height of the main stem and tree, so that we can keep the trees and squeeze more usable life out of them. They continue to provide the ground holding and the function, more akin to mowing the lawns every 3 or 5 years. For whatever reason, budget constraints, the regular maintenance, lopping, etc., was largely let go about sort of 15 years ago. And with the larger varieties, they've just they've grown to epic proportions. So we're having to sort of try and rein that beast in, while also looking to sharpen up on making better use of certain varieties and growth characteristics, so that we're not just throwing in any willow material in everywhere, which I think is sort of what's happened in the past when there weren't quite so many options available, you know. So that's the other side of it, is the reining in the operational maintenance side of the green asset. Yep.
So
Yeah,
Mark Hudson is the HBRC river management guy. So he coordinates in with us into the tag. But also just a heads up that the river management workshop is going to be in February, and it's going to be in Christchurch. And the 2 other workshops will probably be to be confirmed, but Northland and Manawatu. And they'll be early in autumn next year as well, just as a heads up for anyone on here.
But yeah, feel free to give me a call. But managed a lot of willow berms in Canterbury when I was down there, so there might be a couple of things that could be useful. So happy to take that offline if you want to. Yeah, no problem.
Good as gold. Yeah, and it's Mark that I'm assisting with this piece of work to develop our 10-year program. And I went to a riparian workshop down in Christchurch some months ago with Greg Stanley, which I found really useful as well. But in terms of mapping out the what goes where, really hunting on those sort of growth characteristics of certain species to really sort of put some meat on the bone and that sort of detail. So thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Bart. Any other questions or comments from anyone else? Cool.
Alistair.
AW, I can't see what your name is.
Alistair.
Sorry. Alistair.
You done? Mute yourself, Alistair. Can't hear you. Can't hear you. Can you type it in the chat or something?
Can you hear me this time?
Oh, there we go.
Yep.
Okay, different mic. Yeah, I'm down in Southland. Yeah, totally different landscape from your 2 pictures adjoining properties. We don't have as much of the steep country up there, so different issues, I guess. I'm not that familiar with willows and poplars. I did meet Bala a number of years ago when he worked at Southland Regional Council, and his sidekick Gary Morgan. They're very keen on poplars and willows. I'll need to get a bit more familiar and catch up with Keith and our council down here. But aside from the trapping sedimentation around the riparian edges and things like that, and flood control runoff, it would be good. I'll go through the presentation when I've got more time, review it, but be good to see opportunities taken from bioenergy and also timber. I know of one guy down here who's in the ETS with Poplar. Shared the link with him. He'll review this later, but yeah, on a personal basis, I see opportunities for that. I think in Europe they use it for bioenergy. From many years ago they did. I suppose they still do. But yeah, no, I'll go through all the stuff and try and get more familiar with it. But I'll have to go shortly. I'm just in my lunch break. So, but thanks very much, Sally and everybody. Yeah.
Thanks, Alistair.
So that's about it from me.
Yeah, just on that note regarding opportunities and bioengineering and timber, we actually delivered a webinar to the New Zealand Institute of Forestry on Tuesday night, and that covered a lot of the uses of timber, and that webinar will also be made available on our website in due course.
Good. Yeah. Okay, thanks very much. We'll catch you in a while, I guess. Yeah.
Nice. Cool. Thanks, Alistair.
I have to go.
Yeah, cheers, mate.
Thank you.
Enjoy the
Bye.
day. Any other questions or comments in relation to the strategy or the annual plan? If not, I will thank you, Sally, for your part in the presentation, the main part, and thanks everyone for joining us. Really appreciate it. Some good questions and comments. I hope you've got something out of that. Of course, the strategy and annual plan should be available on the website, so I will share the final slide again at the end. So if you want to have a look at that, I'll leave it up for a minute or two to get the web address and the contact details if you want to get hold of us. But appreciate your interest, and we'll catch you on the hills or in the rivers. Cheers.
Just a note that the documents aren't on the website right now. So, but give me within the next week. We'll compile it with the webinar, and only the overview is on the website.
Brilliant. So they'll be there within a week or so. But there's also a plethora of other information that you can occupy yourself with in the meantime. Brilliant. Cheers. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Tanya. Thanks, Sally.
Thank you, guys.